We've been waiting for this for a long time, y'all. We're going to have somebody talk about toxic relationships from a first person point of view. Our guest is Rosie Aiello. She was in a relationship for 25 years and then engineered an international escape from the Middle East. And don't jump to conclusions. We're going to get into her story in just a minute. She saved herself and her young adult daughter from domestic violence. Let me just read a little bit more. She was stunned by PTSD, as you can imagine, nearly mentally destroyed. She reinvented herself since coming back to the United States, started her own business to help women like her. She became a speaker. She has a podcast of her own called Vulnerable to Valuable. She's a best-selling co-author and an international award-winning entrepreneur. And it has a happy ending. She found the love of her life. Rosie, I'm so excited to have you here. I've been waiting for this for a long time.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. When we connected, man, it was just like fire. I was like, you get attached to somebody, you just have that feeling. And I'm just so glad to be here. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and we had a little bit of problem connecting. And whenever, I've said this before, whenever I have problems with connecting with someone, I know it's going to be big and it's going to be awesome. So just really, really excited about having you here. So you are originally from the United States. Tell us the story of how you met this man that you were in a relationship for 25 years and how you ended up in the Middle East. So just a little bit of the background on you and your story.
We met at Berkeley. I was an undergrad and he was a graduate student. We didn't get married right away. Years had passed and he was already working in the Middle East, but he came over to the United States on a regular basis and he always said hi. He was always sweet and friendly and I admired him. And then one time I was available, he was available, and one thing led to the other. We had a long distance relationship and then we got married and I left my career, my family, my friends, and moved to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia first.
Oh my goodness. And this was in what year?
This was,
Approximately?
yeah, it was in 1986.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was married in 85. So right along the same timeline. So what
Yeah.
was a big, and I mean, that was huge, leaving your family in California, correct?
Yes, in California. Uh-huh.
And moving to the Middle East in the 80s. So was there any political strife or what was going on in the Middle East at that time? Because I know
Um,
now would be a huge,
well, he's not so much in Saudi Arabia, at least not at the time.
Mhm.
I like to say that I probably have seen more war and military conflicts than probably the average military person in the United States. Because I've exposed to it a lot actually. Uh, a latter part in we had the 1991 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and then there's uprisings. Then I mean, he's Lebanese. He's Greek Orthodox. He's Christian Lebanese. So we did travel there, and there's a lot of war stories there. But when I went there, there were in Saudi Arabia. It was a safe place, very very safe place.
Mhm. Now, that's the one thing that I said in your introduction, because as soon as you say, oh, she escaped from the Middle East, people assume it's going to be,
Mm.
somebody that was Muslim and you were in this relationship, but he was Christian.
Yes, he
So,
was.
and it was still a very abusive relationship.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it was. Um, and I didn't, when you go into a relationship, and I think of most women that I've spoken to as well, is that you're not expecting this. I didn't even really know what a narcissist was or until I came back. I started to have inklings. I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So I always blamed myself because they made sure to say, oh, well, if you only did this, if you only did that. So, because I was so successful in so many other areas of my life, I thought, well, I can fix this. And just kept trying and trying to make it better. And I didn't have any support system, no family or friends. I mean, I had some new friends, but you don't just start sharing things like that. So it was really difficult as I was going through this and not knowing what it was I was experiencing.
Right. And we did talk about this a little bit before we started recording. Oftentimes you get into a relationship because it's comfortable and it's something you're accustomed to. So, had you experienced any kind of abuse, whether it be emotional, physical, um, spiritual, anything like that in your life previous?
Well, it's an interesting question. I would say most likely not. And, my mother was maybe a little bit, maybe verbally abusive, but that wasn't the essence of it. But this is what I think, because I've had this, excuse me, with other clients. It's like she says, that's what I'm just, this one I'm thinking of. She goes, my parents were just so loving and had the perfect relationship. They're so loving and kind to each other. And I said, that was kind of like my dad was just super kind. And this is my theory on that for those women like me who didn't have the abuse, but I want to go the next step further. But just on my own personal history, my dad was so kind. I think I didn't learn. I just trusted everybody. And I just assumed everybody was kind. So I had like almost the opposite where I just, well, why wouldn't you be kind? So
Right.
I didn't have any God, I didn't have any like, you know, I didn't know how to set a boundary because there were no boundaries to be set. Does it even make sense?
Mhm.
And so it left me open to being very vulnerable. Now, why from vulnerable to valuable podcast, why it made me so vulnerable? Because I didn't really have those skills.
Mhm.
Now, on the flip side of it, now that I've been through this, what I believe strongly too is that when women realize this and they're in this relationship, this is the time when we need to be the disruptors, because what's going to happen is the children are the ones who are going to be the most impacted. And this is the mission is really to help the generations to come. And children, or unless you have been had some therapy or you've done some work on yourself or something, what happens that children will either become abused or abusers unless something else and comes into their life where they can wake up and change, because that's what they know. And this is why this work is so important, is to stop, to disrupt that continuation of what it happens, because we're impacting generations to come.
Right. Now it's really interesting. Let me jump back to what you said, because you threw in a word that is kind of a big thing for me, is boundaries.
Hmm.
So how does somebody set boundaries, especially if you've never done it before? Some people have never even heard. What do you mean boundaries? So a little bit about what boundaries are and how do you set them for yourself or in a relationship, or, and also we want to make clear too that when we talk about relationships, we're not just talking about marriage relationships or intimate relationships. We're talking about parents, work, church, school, all relationships in our
Business
lives.
associates. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I've talked to women all over the world, it's the same thing.
Right.
Well, first of all, I like to set up what I call the honor system. And so many women just think that they can, oh, well, I can't tell him how I feel. I'm gonna make things uncomfortable. I'm going to, um, you know, I can just put up with it. This kind of an attitude, right? And so when and then in your heart, you can feel it when you're feeling uncomfortable. You can feel it, right? So that's the first warning sign, is when you're feeling uncomfortable. What that means is that you're giving in to something that is not right for you. And when each time you give in, you give up a part of you. And as you keep giving up a part of you, your whole authentic self becomes just buried, and you have lost yourself. This is how you lose yourself. And this is why you can't stand up for yourself. So part of setting the boundaries is first knowing what is important to you, knowing your values. If you can't set boundaries unless you have established that. And a lot of people just like kind of just like just just avoid it. But we have these values we've kind of picked up over time, and maybe they're not valid for us anymore, or we haven't even looked at them ever. Like, well, what's important to me? You're so women are so good and groomed at people pleasing, right? Just another word for giving up your power, for people pleasing, that creating a boundary doesn't even enter into their mind. So the boundary is there to protect you. The boundary is not about controlling anybody else. You set your boundaries and you honor your own boundary. So you set the boundary, and it's to protect yourself. And it's not to create a wall, it's to actually allow you to be your full authentic self. So you show up in the world empowered. And like what we were talking before, is like, okay, well, what's important to me? Well, it's important to me that no one yells at me. So if somebody's going to yell at me, now you don't have to always tell somebody the boundary. You have to know it.
Mhm.
You have to know it in your mind. So in my mind is like, okay, if somebody yells at me, I will either tell the person, do not yell at me. I don't accept that. Or I will, depends on where you are on the line. But there's always, if you do this, then I'm going to do this. And then you do it. You have to, and you're doing it, you're not doing it against the other person. You're doing it for yourself. Now, some people may not like it, but you know what? Do you want to be around people who are not going to honor you how you deserve to be?
But first you have to establish what your values are, right?
That's right.
Right.
First thing.
Mm.
And that's one of the things I work with the women on. They think they know their values, but they're they're almost always, at least the majority of their values are old and off, and they're not even aware of them.
How often do you suggest people reassess or re-look at their own values or what's important to them?
Well, I would say at least every 6 months, but once you do it, and especially the way I teach it, is like it becomes an integral part of your life. You're
Mhm.
fully aware of your values and you're living them every day.
Mhm.
I mean, it has to be, this is the foundation of who you are. This is your core of what matters to you.
Right. Right. And I
Women
like
are,
go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was going to say women don't usually give themselves that chance of, oh, what's important to me? I don't know. I have to settle in this. I have to settle for the relationship. I can't get the relationship I want. I can't find my love, my life. No, I just have to settle. Is
Right.
that kind of attitude that is really damaging to a woman's um, whole life.
Right. Now, you said something that I think might be a flag for people, the word power or empowerment, because we always like, woman power, or I need to be more, empowered. And I think that's a positive thing, but I know that can come across to some people as a negative thing, like you're going to overpower somebody or be dismissive or minimizing men. But I don't think I don't think that's what you're talking about. I think you and I are in agreement. But have you found women who don't like the word power or empowerment?
I not in the women I work with.
Well, that's good.
Not in the women I work with, but I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was even a feeling that I had. As like, oh my gosh, oh, we're going to be overpowering, that we're going to just think we're so dominating and all of these things. But this is the thing. These are thoughts. These are things that have been given to us. This is like a value. Oh, women should not be powerful. There's something wrong with that. But there's a difference between um, owning your own power, owning who you are, and dominating. Yeah, that's how it can be misconstrued.
Right.
We're not here to dominate, but we're not here to be dominated either. And I think that's the difference. It's not okay to be dominated. And women will accept these, accept it. I did. I mean, because I didn't know. I just thought, oh well, I just got to do better. And I didn't understand it, right?
Right. So, if you don't mind me asking, in your relationship, was it physical? Was it emotional, spiritual? What kind of domineering? Was he a narcissist? A little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it was like a little stew. A little bit of everything. It was primarily emotional, mental abuse, financial abuse. I have an MBA in finance, and if I could talk a whole segment on the financial abuse alone. So the other thing I want women to hear very clearly, it has nothing to do with your intelligence or how smart you are, how brilliant you are. Because women think, how could I have gotten myself into this? I'm so smart. How could I have done this? Right. So there's a lot of self-blame.
Mhm.
But I had sprinklings of physical abuse and sexual abuse. Sexual abuse especially came up when he would be explosive. Sometimes he would sit me down, literally, Colleen, for maybe an hour to 4 hours lecturing me. I would sit down and he would scream at me. And then it was like a volcano had just exploded, and then it just calmly cools down, right? And then that's when he would say, "Oh, let's go to the bed." Like I didn't want to be near him, but I gave in because it's like, I don't want to cause another problem. So you see how I kept giving up my power because I was so afraid.
Mhm.
The fear kept me also small, and the shame.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely, and I think some of it may come in too where it's, you have a family situation like, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm a beautiful woman. I don't want to be a failure in a
Yes.
in that marriage or in that
Mhm.
relationship.
Mhm.
So women, what we tend to do is smooth things over, let me make
Mhm.
things right. I will be the
Mhm.
caretaker and I will make this work. So did you struggle with some of that, or do you have the women that you work one-on-one
Oh,
with
yeah,
coaching?
100%. I call it the peacemaker. We are all
Mm,
Colleen, I tell my women, I says, "We should win the Academy Award for Best Actress."
yes.
Because we put on the front, we would smile, everything looks really good. I was a constant peacemaker. I want to tell a story if I can, and it's really it just shows you what happens to a family and a woman. So we were on our way. Actually, it was to midnight mass. It wasn't midnight mass. It was Christmas Eve mass, but it was at 8 o'clock at night because of my daughter. She was young. And my husband had gotten really angry at me that day. I'm not going to go into the details of that. But on our way to church, it was about a 40-minute drive because we were going to a special place. From the moment we got into the car to the moment we arrived at the church, he was screaming at us. I mean, it was the day that I was ready to open the door and jump out of the car. I mean, I literally was that close. When we got to the church, I just told my daughter, just apologize to your father. I mean, and she really didn't, she was a teenager. And here I was, I just felt like I was prostituting my daughter, just make peace, right? Make peace. It's Christmas Eve. I just want peace, and the family. And so I'll never forget. He went into the pew first, and my daughter, then me. And she turned back to me. She goes, "Mama," I should go, so she apologized. She goes, "Mama, Papa forgives me." And I was just like, I was so upset because how dare him even think to forgive her? I mean, she didn't need to be forgiven. Do you know what I'm saying?
She didn't do anything wrong.
Right?
Yeah.
But that was the extent to what I was always trying to create peace,
Mhm.
even making my daughter create peace. And it pains me to this day and those happened a lot. It was always trying to create peace, not make him get angry so we could have some peace in the family.
Mhm.
Because you do this, these are survival techniques. So I want women to understand too that there's absolutely no judgment on anything that you've ever done, but everyone has a different way to survive. And we do the best we can given what we know, which for me was very, very little.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's not something I was grew up doing or learning about. I didn't learn this from my parents, how to identify a narcissist,
Right.
how
No.
to defend yourself. No, we were just like white picket fence, get married, you make it work
Yes.
and have a beautiful family. And
Yes.
that's why I love your mission, which you said earlier about making sure that this can be a generational thing and often is. And here you were with your daughter, like, now is she going to turn around and find a relationship? So how did that, oh gosh, I don't want to jump ahead. I was going to ask how it impacted your daughter. Well, we're talking about her now. Let's go ahead and do that. But I want to also know the turning point in the marriage that got you to, like, okay, enough is enough. I'm done and get out. So I want to talk about your daughter first, and then I want to go
Okay.
back to your story and
Okay.
get
Well,
like, how did you get out?
it'll be a good segue.
Good. Oh.
So, so it impacted my daughter very severely, and I think part of it too is that she's hypersensitive, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, she's got high sensitivities, and she came back with complex PTSD to which this day she's still suffering. And I am a strong believer that um, children, as much as parents, we know it, but we don't know it, that they will always know what's going on. There's not, we can't hide from our children what is happening. And so she observed everything. She observed a lot. And a lot of times she told me, well, this is what she said later on, but she goes, sometimes, Mama, your love wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to offset the abuse from her father. And that's why I'm not breaking up a good family,
Right.
but women need to own what is happening. And if they are being abused, their children are being abused, even if they're not being directly abused by observation. And they will become abusers or abused if we don't break the cycle, unless they get help in some shape or form, or they
Right.
wake up, or they read something.
Hmm.
And it'll be a generational thing. It'll go on and on and on and on. And we have to stop it at the source. And that's the only way.
I'm pulling back tears right now because it's our roles as moms and raising our families and raising our children is so it's like goes back to the saying, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And if we don't stop the cycle of abuse, who will?
Yeah. Who will? That's right. And it takes a lot of courage. And again, anybody who's listening, there is absolutely no judgment. I know it took me a long time before I was able to get out. And you want to go into what was it? So I'm going to tell you, because this is such a perfect segue. Um, it's funny, the emotions come up, even though it's been a little bit of a while. But my daughter, we were now in Beirut, Lebanon, where her father is from. We had moved there from Saudi Arabia, and we'd been there for a few years. And she was now in college, and she was attending the American University of Beirut. But the first year she lived on campus. The second year, after the first year, he made her come back and live home. Now you have to put this in perspective. It's actually very common in the Middle East, everywhere in the Middle East, for children to live at home until they get married. So it's not like here, but it is. I want to kind of put that into a little bit of context, but nevertheless, and he was harassing her all the time. And so she came running home one day, ran up the stairs. I was in my office, and she said, Mom, you've got to take me away from my abusive father. And so within
Whoa.
4 months, I planned the escape of our lives.
Wow. I just talking like she was in college, but out of the mouths of babes,
Yes.
how did you feel when she said that to you?
Well, I was a little, I wasn't in this mindset at that moment, right?
Right.
That very moment. And my first reaction was, well, are you sure? I mean, you only have a couple years or a year. I can't, yeah, 1 year. You only have one more year to graduate. No, Mom, I can't. And then I think, yes, what? Stay one more year and imbibe poison, right? Get sicker.
Right.
I mean, we were both so suicidal. I mean, I told you about, I was ready to open that door that day. I mean, my hand was on the handle, ready to open that door.
To jump
But
out.
I thought of my daughter. Well, I can't leave my daughter with my husband. And later on, when we were back in the when we were in the United States, because she was born overseas, she told me, she goes, "Oh, I can't commit suicide. I can't leave Mom with my father alone." So we both kind of saved each other, as sick as that sounds,
Right.
but that's how desperate you can be.
So did you hide it from him? Did you like, okay, I'm going to get my own money, or because you're in the Middle East. I mean, Beirut, for heaven's sakes. How did you, and only 4 months, which kudos, girl, because that's quick. Because I know
Yeah.
people that it takes years for them to raise the money and keep it, this whole secret life they live trying to plan their escape from an abusive relationship. So to do it in 4 months, that's pretty impressive. So what
Mhm.
did you go through, and did you ever speak to him about it? Did you just disappear? Or, I mean, how do you get out of the Middle East?
My daughter and I are writing a memoir. I've written 40 pages on this, which will not go in the memoir, but there's a lot to it. So it's a big question. I don't know how long you want to stay here,
I
girl.
just hit the bullet points.
So in my when I was working, I was working in corporate in Silicon Valley. I was working in strategic planning. So I think that helped a lot. But my brother was also instrumental because my brain was pretty much fried.
Right.
And so he was somebody who, my ex-husband was somebody who stayed home most of the time working. So no, escape 101 is you do not tell them, because especially in his case, he could literally have kept me there, right? I could have been, so I couldn't tell him. So for 4 months, I was packing up things from the house under his nose. We had a live-in maid. I had to hide it from a live-in maid. Don't even tell me how I did all this stuff. I think God was watching over me.
Absolutely.
The details are incredible. So I don't know if any of you have read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Not that
Absolutely.
I'm not comparing my life to him in any
Right.
shape or form. However, how did he escape? He escaped naked in in a truck full of dead, naked bodies. So he escaped in plain daylight. So we were planning a trip to the United States. So that day we left our house. We were in the taxi going to the airport. My daughter was in the back seat. I sat next to her, and my husband was in front. All three of us were going to the United States, but I knew only one was going to be coming back.
Yeah.
So we went Beirut to Paris. There are no direct flights to the United States from Beirut. Paris, San Francisco. It's an 11-hour flight. That 11-hour flight, let me tell you, my heart was beating like crazy. I mean, even before. And my daughter and I looked at each other, and it's like we knew what was coming down. And I looked at him. My brother was going to be meeting us at the airport. I knew exactly where, when those gates opened up, international arrivals, I knew exactly where he was going to be. We each had our own little luggage carts. My daughter and I took our luggage carts. We parked them behind my brother. I was so terrified of my husband. I had my brother go and tell him, Rosie's upset. She needs to have some time alone. I couldn't even say, I had to have a lot of psychology support to even speak those words finally. So we did. Some other things happened. And then we turned our backs and walked out, leaving him standing alone in the middle of a busy airport.
Oh my goodness. I have bumps all over. I call them spirit bumps, but some people call them goosebumps. I have bumps all over my body because I could just imagine when you have to have your brother say the words, that's how frightened you were.
Oh, I was
After
terrified.
25 years being just being torn down and torn
Yes.
down little by little by little. They talk like the frog in the boiling water. Just all of a sudden one day you look in the mirror and go, where am I? Where did I go?
Yeah.
How did I become such a shell? I'm
Yes.
educated. I'm beautiful. and it's 25 years later.
Yeah.
So did you ever have any more contact with him after that?
Yeah. I mean, the phone just started blasting, he called my cell phone and my daughters and my brother. I mean, so yeah, there was quite a turmoil, and I love this woman. This is the woman of my life. There's no other woman I've ever loved. And I knew it would flip. It was like a flip of a switch. He would flip over like he did, 100 million times before in our relationship.
Mhm.
And I needed a lot of support within the first week that I arrived there. My brother and I already did a triage. I interviewed three attorneys. I hired an attorney. We set everything in motion right away. I had not been a resident of California, so we had to get a legal separation, and it was boom, 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 right down the line. And he kept trying to profess his love for me, and let's work it out. And it's now been 11 and a half years, and to this day, I will be harassed by him or his cronies who keep, yes,
Still.
still to this day. My birthday was in November. He made sure to poke me, right? He thinks I kidnapped our daughter. He has
Right.
no idea that she was the instigator. Well, she wasn't the instigator. She was the catalyst. It was a matter
Right.
of time.
There was the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. I can just imagine my daughter, if one of my children came to me, is protect me from daddy. The guilt and the shock. And like you said, well, you just have another year left for your degree.
Yeah.
We've put up this long. Let's just wait a minute. What am I saying?
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly it.
Right.
And she goes, no, mom. And I go, well, yeah, right. Okay. But it's like, I mean, you're just like, just like your mind just starts churning like crazy. Like, what am I going to do? And,
Mhm.
and I only had plan A, freedom.
Right,
That was it. There was no plan B. It was going to work.
right.
And
It
I
had to
just
work.
knew
Right.
it had to work. I knew, and I planned it, how we were going to leave him, and everything else kept changing, but I knew it had to be in a busy place because he doesn't like to be embarrassed.
Oh, that's part of a narcissist. We can go into a whole definition of narcissism and their personalities and but that's beside the point. Well, it's part of the point, but I think it's important too that people understand. I talk about this a lot, but it's important to understand that cycle of abuse because they're not beating on you and degrading you all the time. There's the I love you, I'm warm and charismatic and and then there's the explosion and the abuse and then there's the apology and then there's the warmth again and then so it just goes in this cycle and after a while sometimes that cycle can be 2 months, it can be 2 days, it can be 2 hours,
Yeah.
but there's that cycle and it doesn't get better, it always gets worse.
Worse. Yeah, and that's what was my experience. I mean, at the very end, I was terrified. He had never been like, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, but I thought he was going to kill me, and even after I arrived back in the United States, I thought he was going, because he had the money, that he was going to arrange you know, run me off the road, hire somebody to run me off the road. I really
Right.
believed it. I was so terrified of him.
Understandably. So how did that impact your daughter now? Is she married now or because this was
No,
back in 2009, but
yeah.
how's that impacted her and her relationships?
Well, it has, because she had a hard time, not when she was there, but here, making friendships. I mean, she has now, but knowing who she was, she didn't have the chance to live her life. She never had the opportunity to be a teenager. That was taken from her. And for psychological development, they have to go through all the stages. You can't jump to adulthood. You have to go through the psychology of being an adolescent before you get there.
Mhm.
So, intellectually, again, she's very intelligent. She graduated with honors from the university here. But she has challenges that she's still coping with, and she's so bright. She's so giving. She has so many gifts uh, that blow my mind. But I also see her struggles. And of course, as a mother, it's extremely painful,
Mhm.
and it's painful that, she saw a mother who wasn't confident, who wasn't empowered, who didn't know herself. So that was the model she saw of me, which wasn't a good model. Women need to be aware of that, right? So she had a father who was abusive, and she had a mother who looked weak.
Mhm.
So she had a lot to deal with.
Right. And so she never found the love of her life, the kind love of her
Well,
life that
not
was
yet. I
meant.
mean, she's
Right.
still, she still has time, but
Absolutely. Oh, plenty of time. I
yeah,
always say it's better to
yeah,
never get married than to marry the wrong person.
yeah,
I say that to
yeah,
my daughters and my sons, both.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah,
better to never get married than to marry the wrong person. So there's
yeah,
always time to find somebody. And you have now found
yeah,
a kind love of your life. How did
yes.
that happen?
Well, it was after doing a lot of work on myself. And I had made another major shift. And we were talking a little bit before we went on air that, the company is called the Love is Kind Network, because I wanted to focus on what I wanted. And when I was dating before, I was saying, well, I want to make sure he doesn't control me and he doesn't abuse me and he doesn't do this. And I can't, and it was all this negative thing. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to look for somebody who is kind to me. I'm going to look for somebody who who is kind and thoughtful. And this guy on his profile had kindness as one of his primary values. Kindness is one of my primary values. And really, I think that's the basis for our relationship. So now, I mean, I experience peace, love, and joy every single day with this man, and kindness. And somebody who listens to me and who hears me. And it's the most beautiful relationship, and I'm so glad I'm able to experience it, even though late in my life. it's
Right.
worth it every second.
But I think you said something really important there, Rosie, where you had to work on yourself first so that you didn't get into a duplicate relationship
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
first one. So you had to focus on your pillars and your values and get yourself back, reclaim yourself before you were really healthy enough to put yourself in another relationship.
And this is what I think a lot of women do. They're so alone, they're so lonely that they jump into a relationship before they're really ready, and then they wonder why it keeps quote unquote failing or not working out. That's how that perpetuation keeps coming. If
Right.
they haven't done that work, that's I'm really passionate about that. That women do the work. They really discover who they are. I didn't know when they said, "Oh, you need to be your authentic self." I go, "What the hell does that mean?" I
I
don't know
know
what,
exactly.
right? It's like, but I had to discover what that meant.
Right. And that's one of the things that I think we have in our show notes is some free materials that you have for people that they can, and I'm assuming you work with mostly women, but I know men can be in abusive relationships too. So tell me a little bit about the gifts that you have for our listeners.
Yeah, the I have is called the 11 Freedom Fulfillment Pillars. This is a guidebook literally to reclaim your voice, your value, your confidence, and courage so you can really create what I call the productive and joyful life that you deserve. You can create that. And this is going to be the most important work you can do in your whole life ever. And this is how these are the pillars that I did followed, and these are the ones that I help my clients with and help them transform their lives. And the other free thing, which is a really great starting point too, is to take what I call the Freedom Fulfillment Quiz. It's the freedomfulfillmentquiz.com. And in 4 minutes, you just get you see where you're at and where you want to be. It's like, oh, okay. Because only change begins when one, you're aware of it, and two, you decide that you want to change. You can be aware of it and decide not to change, and there's nothing anybody else can do to help you.
Right.
But if you say, I'm not satisfied with my life here, I want to have a kind love. I want to be able to set boundaries and not and honor myself and not feel like, I have to be people pleasing all the time. Yeah.
And I think when I was reading through some of the materials earlier, and I thought, I know a lot of women as empty nesters who could use this information as well. And they're not in abusive relationships necessarily. They've just lost track of who they are.
Who they are. Yes, this is so true. We identify ourselves with something, and then now we've lost that. It's like,
Right.
who are we? Who
Right.
are you?
And it's not the end when the children leave, it's not the end of your life. Like
Absolutely
you were
not.
talking about the boogie board.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I was boogie. Yeah, I learned, people, I don't know if you can only hear me, but if you can see me too, but still, I mean, I learned a boogie board like at 64.
right.
I learned a pedal board, a couple years later. I mean, you can create the life you want. You can create it, and it can be an end. My children have left, and I'm creating something new. I mean,
Exactly.
I feel like I'm in the adolescence of my life.
Exactly. I was like when the children moved out and moved on and I was like, "Hey, it's time to be me again." And not
Yeah,
just mom. Now I'm
right.
Colleen again. I'm always mom, there's
Yeah, that's good.
there's only 4 people in the world that can really call me that, but
All right.
and I'm very happy about that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
so when you work with people or you go out, because I know you speak and you write and you do so many amazing, wonderful things that you weren't doing before in your 25-year relationship, and that's all something that you're working on now. What achievement of yours means the most to you?
Oh, well.
Or maybe the top 3,
Yeah, really, blah, blah,
right?
it's like, um, well, obviously the first one would be, my daughter and getting, and really, our freedom, getting our freedom. I think that's a statement of devotion of a mother to a child and to what we believe in. So, that will always be. I mean, there's not one single day I really don't think about my freedom. It's something very dear to me. Um, I'm also, just in general, really proud of what I've created. When I landed in the United States, I had zero concept of what I was going to do with my life. Zero. I had had a past. And when I worked in Silicon Valley, and then the 25 years with my ex-husband, but I had no idea. And the fact that I look back on my life and I've become an international award-winning entrepreneur. I've become a speaker, a writer, it's like I look at it, it's like mind-boggling. And I think the message here is not to ever use your past to determine your future. You can create your future. And regarding the relationships, I sometimes say that I would rather fight and struggle to create my own future than fight and struggle in an abusive relationship where I'm getting nowhere.
Right.
They might both be difficult, but at least I'm creating something.
Right.
I'm creating and doing my life. And you can see that this doesn't mean I'm with a wonderful man. It doesn't mean like you create your life and you're empowered and then, men are not important anymore. Very important in my life.
Absolutely.
One guy is very important in my life. One.
That's right.
You can have it all.
Mhm. Oh, amen. Oh, and there's no more beautiful way to to end this than that, exactly that point right there. You can have it all: happiness, fulfillment, and your mission, and your children, and all of it. Rosie, thank you so much. You're going to stick around because we're going to do a special bonus for our VIPs, for our people in our cafe club, the Cappuccino members. But thank you so much for sharing your story and offering all the free resources for people that they can take advantage of, and for your work and your mission in life. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for giving me this opportunity, Colleen.
You bet. And we'll take care. Make sure that you take a look at the show notes, get the free information, follow Rosie and her podcast and her information, and please share it, because there are so many women out there that are not hearing this, that need to hear this message so that they can protect themselves, their family, their children, and future generations. Thank you so much for joining us on this issue of Coffee with Colleen.